What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. My name is Lucas Wencl, and today we are talking about 10 players that you should be looking to stash ahead of the Week 6 slate and ahead of next week's waivers as well. But before we dive on into that list of players, you can take the guesswork out of waiver wire decisions with FantasyPros Waiver Assistant. It will give you instant analysis on potential moves from over 100 fantasy experts. You'll also discover both the weekly and rest of season impact for every waiver ad. All you have to do is visit fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Again, all you have to do, visit fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app to optimize your roster today. Kicking off our list this week is Baltimore Ravens running back Justice Hill, who's rostered in 26% of leagues. It was a dissatisfying outing for Justice Hill in Week 5 after scoring 21.6 fantasy points against the Bills in Week 4. His role is very clear within this offense. Watch the big dog, Derrick Henry, eat, and give him a breather until we need you in the receiving game. It's not a sexy or consistent role by any means, but when he's called upon, he's delivered this year. As one of the most valuable handcuffs in fantasy football that also possesses standalone value, Hill can be added at the end of your bench with solid matchups coming up against the Commanders, and the Buccaneers especially, who are top 3 in receptions, targets, and receiving yards allowed to running backs this year. The second player on our list is the Las Vegas Raiders wide receiver Tre Tucker, who's rostered in 14% of leagues. Tucker was on a mini heater prior to Week 5, scoring 22.6 fantasy points in Week 3 and 15.4 points in Week 4. Last week was a letdown, scoring only 4.6 fantasy points, but Tucker saw the field plenty still. He was second on the team in snaps and ran a route on 64% of them, which was the second highest rate on the team, only to Brock Bowers. There's still time for things to bounce Tre Tucker's way. The rumors are still furiously swirling around a Devontae Adams trade. Jacoby Myers was a DNP on Wednesday, even though he's reportedly fine. You're likely not going to be able to flex Tre Tucker in Week 6, but he does get a nice matchup with the Los Angeles Rams in Week 7, and in deeper leagues, he's worth a stash at the end of your bench. Up next is Michael Wilson, wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals, who's rostered in 14% of leagues. Michael Wilson has actually been Arizona's leading receiver over the last 3 weeks, totaling 35 more yards than Marvin Harrison Jr. on 4 more receptions while commanding a 25.6% target share. Will that trend continue? I would certainly think not, but Wilson has been giving you flex-worthy performances recently. He scored at least 12.8 fantasy points in 2 of the last 3 weeks, while finishing as the wide receiver 28 and wide receiver 32 in each of those games. This week's matchup with the Packers could be high scoring with projected point total of 49.5. The Packers are top 10 in both receiving yards and fantasy points allowed to wide receivers this year, and this could be another solid spot for Michael Wilson to give you top 35 production. The fourth player to consider stashing this week is Indianapolis Colts wide receiver Adonai Mitchell, who's rostered in 9% of leagues. News dropped earlier this week that Michael Pittman Jr. is expected to be out multiple weeks with a back injury and is a candidate to be placed on injured reserve. While this is a big blow for the Colts wide receiver room, it presents an opportunity to Adonai Mitchell. Despite slipping in snaps, Mitchell drew 7 targets from Joe Flacco against the Jaguars on Sunday while only running 12 routes. That turned into his most productive week of the season, going for 38 yards on 4 receptions while also adding a lone carry. I'm still a believer in the talent of Adonai Mitchell, and if the Colts get him out on the field more in Michael Pittman's absence, I'm willing to stash him and see what comes with it. Another running back you can look to stash this week is Ray Davis of the Buffalo Bills, who's rostered in 8% of leagues. Prior to Week 5, Ray Davis had been consistently given 7+ rush attempts per game. Against the Texans, however, he only played 2 of the team's 61 snaps and wasn't given a single rush attempt. I'm not scared off by this outing, though, because James Cook missed practice earlier this week with a toe injury. As of this recording, there's no clear indication as to what the injury actually is, but there is speculation that it might be turf toe. If that is the diagnosis, James Cook may be forced to miss time, paving the way for Ray Davis to handle early down work in his absence. And if James Cook does miss extended time, now we're looking at a running back who would for sure be in flex consideration, if not running back 2 consideration. At the very least, you're stashing a handcuff on a Josh Allen-led offense that can put up points. Beat your league mates to the punch and get ahead of them by stashing Ray Davis now. Coming in next is Jalen Polk, wide receiver for the New England Patriots, who's rostered in 8% of leagues. We're finally starting to see Jalen Polk emerge as the soon-to-be top option in this offense. In Week 5, he participated on 100% of the team's snaps, which only 10 other players have done this year. He's also run a route on 84% of available routes over the last 2 weeks, making him a mainstay in this offense. And for the best part, we finally get to see Drake May in his NFL debut in Week 6. Now, certainly not ideal that it's against the Houston Texans, but this is an opportunity for this offense to have newfound life after Jacoby Brissett failed to put up 170 passing yards in a single game through the first 5 weeks. It may be ugly to watch, but the potential is on the rise for Jalen Polk, and if he continues to stay on the field at the rate he has for the Patriots, Drake May will have plenty of opportunities to target him. We're getting to the deep leagues now by stashing Xavier Hutchinson of the Houston Texans, who's rostered in 2% of leagues. To somewhat of a surprise, Nico Collins was placed on IR at the start of the week with a hamstring injury. Obviously, this is a big blow to the Texans, but in his absence, it was Xavier Hutchinson who stepped in and played the second most snaps of all Texans wide receivers, ran 28 routes, and drew 3 targets. He caught 2 of them for 31 yards, so it wasn't a monster day by any means, but it's clear that he's next in line ahead of Robert Woods and John Mechie. It will be Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell as the top dogs in this wide receiver room, but I'm willing to mess around and find out with Xavier Hutchinson. The Texans are top 10 in pass play rate this year, and with CJ Stroud at the helm, Hutchinson could provide more value than we think. Next up is Denver Broncos running back Audric Estime, who's rostered in 2% of leagues. We're sticking with the deep league stashes here, especially since Estime is still on the IR. However, he had his practice window open earlier this week, and the Broncos now have 21 days to activate him. That's good news for Estime, who was widely speculated to have a role in this offense prior to his injury in Week 1. Javonte Williams has been better over the last 2 weeks, getting 18 and 19 opportunities against the Jets and Raiders, but his running back 12 finish was against the Raiders after all. Prior to Week 5, Javonte had only been averaging 3.1 yards per carry on the season, and it was a hodgepodge mess between him, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Tyler Bidet. Once Estime is back and healthy, I wouldn't be surprised to see him mixed in with Javonte and McLaughlin, so for those of you in the deepest of leagues, you can stay 2 to 3 steps ahead of your league mates by stashing Audric Estime. Making our list again this week is tight end Erick All Jr. of the Cincinnati Bengals, who's rostered in 2% of leagues. To the eye, Erick All took a slight step backwards in Week 5, only drawing 2 targets and catching both for 10 yards. However, we need to look past the box score because Erick All has now outsnapped Mike Gesicki in 3 of the last 4 games. He still ran less routes, but the Bengals are starting to increase All's usage week over week and getting the Iowa product out on the field more. After what we just saw from the Bengals passing attack on Sunday, I want pieces of that. Mike Gesicki and Andre Yoshivas may be trending down, but I am more than happy to take a shot on Erick All, who's trending up and just needs 1 week to make a splash before people go crazy on the waiver wire over him. Last but not least, for all of you playing in leagues where you start a defense and special teams unit, you can look to stash the Philadelphia Eagles fresh off their bye and are rostered in only 33% of leagues. To be perfectly honest, the Eagles defense has been pretty bad from a fantasy perspective this year. They're 28th in fantasy points, averaging only 3.5 points per game. However, they get 2 very desirable matchups with the Cleveland Browns and the New York Giants over the next 2 weeks. Need I say more than getting to play Deshaun Watson and Daniel Jones? The Eagles have a real chance to rack up sacks and create turnovers in these next 2 games, so if you're in need, stash this unit now. Alrighty, y'all, that is it. That is all I've got for you today. But before we sign off here, remember, you can take the guesswork out of waiver wire decisions with FantasyPros Waiver Assistant. It will give you instant analysis on potential moves from over 100 fantasy experts. You'll also discover both the weekly and rest of season impact for every waiver ad. All you have to do is visit fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Again, all you have to do, visit fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app to optimize your roster today.